Welcome to CDFA's 2025 Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, or SCBGP, Additional Assistance for Historically Underrepresented Organizations webinar. Today, we will have a brief overview of the SCBGP, discuss the Additional Assistance Program, offer guidance on specific sections of the application, and discuss requirements for managing this federal award. You can submit questions one of two ways: by writing them into the chat or by raising your hand. Hover the mouse at the bottom of the screen to see the chat or reaction buttons. In reactions, you can click on the raise hand icon to let us know you'd like to ask a question. At the end of the presentation, we will leave time for participants to ask any unanswered questions. Finally, if you think of questions later, please email them to grants@cdfa.ca.gov. If you are watching the recording and have any questions, please email them to grants@cdfa.ca.gov. And please visit our website, which will be included later in the presentation, for copies of useful documents, including the Request for Concept Proposals, or RFCP, CDFA's Allowable and Unallowable Costs and Activities Table, the Outcome Measures Supplement, the USDA's list of eligible and ineligible commodities, the current General Schedule 15 Step 10, and most importantly, the Additional Assistance application. The Specialty Crop Block Grant Program is funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture Agricultural Marketing Service. The purpose of the SCBGP is to enhance the competitiveness of California specialty crops. The program priorities we'll discuss later in this presentation are intended to help applicants develop proposals that meet that purpose through this competitive process. Projects cannot benefit a single organization or single individuals. Specialty crops are fruits, including dried fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts, culinary and medicinal herbs and spices, and nursery, floriculture, and horticulture crops. Commodities such as dairy, livestock, eggs, grains, and cannabis are not eligible. There is a list of specialty crops on the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA website, but it is not all-inclusive. If there are any questions about whether a commodity is eligible, please feel free to ask. The Additional Assistance Program was developed to increase participation in the SCBGP among smaller organizations that may not have the resources, staffing, or capacity to easily apply and administer a federal award. SCBGP funds cannot directly benefit those organizations, but CDFA can provide technical assistance and administrative support throughout the process, including in the development of a concept proposal, which should help participants expand their capacity to apply for and administer grant funds. In this program, USDA receives funding from the Farm Bill, then approved funding goes to CDFA, and CDFA subawards funds to recipients. The 2018 Farm Bill contains provisions for the continuation of this program. However, as of the date of this webinar, Congress has not passed a new Farm Bill or a continuing budget resolution to reauthorize funding for the program. While CDFA anticipates continued funding for the program, as described in the 2018 Farm Bill, grant funds will only be made available if continuing authorization for the program is established and funds are made available by USDA AMS. For this program, the award amounts range from $100,000 to $250,000. Projects cannot be longer than 2 years and 8 months, beginning on or after November 1st, 2025, and ending by June 30th, 2028. Note that all grant activities, including mandatory outreach of the project results and completing final reports and invoices, cannot occur any later than June 30th, 2028. So we recommend that projects end their main activities no later than a few months ahead of these deadlines and dedicate the final few months of their projects to these outreach and grant management tasks. As noted in the beginning, the timeline for the entire solicitation process can be found in the Request for Concept Proposals, or RFCP. Please note that concept proposals to the Additional Assistance Program are due on Friday, September 27, 2024 at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, and that late submissions will not be accepted. Applicants will be notified in December whether they are invited to submit a scope of work and will have approximately 3 months to prepare their application with the help of a CDFA grant analyst. Scopes of work will be due in March 2025. CDFA will then submit the proposal recommendations to USDA in May and wait for the USDA's final say regarding which projects receive funding. We anticipate announcing and awarding funds in the fall of 2025. Note that all funding decisions are made by the USDA, and participation in the Additional Assistance Program does not guarantee funding. The Additional Assistance Program solicitation process is different than the conventional process. First, applicants submit concept proposals for their projects via email. These proposals go through an administrative and technical review, and applicants with successful proposals are invited to submit a full proposal. Applicants are welcome to email grants@cdfa.ca.gov at any time with questions regarding their concept proposal. Submissions should also be to grants@cdfa.ca.gov. Additional assistance applicants will not go through the conventional process for Phase 2. Instead, successful projects will be assigned a grant analyst to develop a full proposal or scope of work for USDA's consideration. Projects that do not advance to the scope of work phase will receive feedback to assist with the development of a proposal in future years. Eligibility for this solicitation is limited to nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, both federally recognized and non-federally recognized, and K-12 school districts. Organizations which are not eligible to apply under this program are encouraged to partner with an eligible organization and can act as a contractor on their proposal. A few additional notes on eligibility. Only organizations that have not previously received SCBGP funds are eligible. Note this only applies to direct recipients. If you have received SCBGP funding as a contractor for a project, you are still eligible for this program. Also, this program is intended for organizations that do not have technical expertise with grant writing, including the capacity to hire or contract with a grant writing consultant. This program is not mandatory for first-time applicants. Even if you have never received SCBGP funds before, you are still welcome to apply through the conventional process. You just won't receive additional assistance to develop a proposal. It is important to note that if your organization applies through the Additional Assistance Program, you are limited to one proposal total. In other words, organizations cannot submit one additional assistance proposal and one conventional proposal, or multiple additional assistance proposals. Here are a few examples of eligible projects for the Additional Assistance Program. These projects enhance the market competitiveness of specialty crops and support either underserved or beginning farmers, or provide nutrition education or access to specialty crops in underserved communities. And here are a few examples of projects that would not be eligible for SCBGP funding. Grant funds will not be awarded for projects that directly benefit or provide a profit to a single organization, institution, or individual. For example, the program will not fund a project to start or expand a farm or business venture, or to provide donations to individuals. Grant funds also cannot be used to compete unfairly with private companies that offer equivalent products or services. Please see the Additional Assistance RFCP for more details on eligibility. We have included the USDA definition of beginning and underserved farmers on this slide, along with a link to the underserved farmer definition established in California. Note that California's definition is somewhat more expansive, but not substantially different. You can also request one-on-one assistance on project-specific questions to assist you with project development. For example, you can submit questions on activities that may be unallowable or unreasonable, or ask for assistance in developing some portions of the concept proposal. If you would like assistance developing a proposal, or for general questions, including the allowability of costs and activities, or for assistance with the application, You can contact the Office of Grant Administration at grants@cdfa.ca.gov. Please put additional assistance in your email subject line. You can also email to schedule a phone call or video meeting if you prefer. Please note that if you receive individual and personalized assistance, you must apply for the Additional Assistance Program. Organizations that receive this assistance and then apply to the conventional SCBGP may be disqualified. Concept proposals for the general SCBGP are submitted through a web-based application called FAST. Applications to the Additional Assistance Program will be via email. To receive a copy of the application form, please email grants@cdfa.ca.gov or visit our website listed here. Complete the form and then return it to the same email address no later than 5 p.m. on Friday, September 27, 2024. In developing a concept proposal, applicants will need to provide information on each of the areas in this slide. There are a few areas we want to bring to your attention. Applicant information. Please note that if your organization is fiscally sponsored, the applicant is your fiscal sponsor. If grant funds are awarded, the grant agreement will be made with the sponsor organization. Funding category. We encourage applicants to double-check that they have selected the correct category. This ensures that the best qualified technical reviewers assess each proposal. Program priorities. Each proposal must select one program priority. You may select more than one, but this is not mandatory. Project beneficiaries. The number of project beneficiaries should be reasonable and trackable during the grant duration. We sometimes see proposals that state, quote, everyone will benefit or all specialty crop farmers will benefit. That may be possible, but it isn't likely to be easily trackable or reportable during the grant duration. Having more beneficiaries does not mean a proposal is more or less likely to receive grant funding. Outcome measures. We'll discuss this in a later slide, but like project beneficiaries, the information provided should be reasonable and achievable within the grant duration. Budget. We encourage all applicants to double-check their budget. Typos or math errors can affect eligibility or cause a project to be disqualified if the budget exceeds the amount allowable. Excessive unallowable costs can also result in a project being disqualified. In the next few slides, we'll briefly go over the Additional Assistance Program priorities. We aren't going to review each priority individually, but you will need to identify one priority in your proposal. You can review the RFCP for these priorities. These are the two funding categories for additional assistance: healthy specialty crops for all Californians and equity, opportunity, and education for all California specialty crop farmers. The healthy specialty crops for all Californians category has 8 priorities, and the first 4 are on this slide. And here are the remaining 4 priorities. Category B is equity, opportunity, and education for all California specialty crop farmers. It has 11 priorities. 4 priorities are listed here. Here are 3 more priorities. And here are the final 4 priorities for this category. As a reminder, the priorities can be reviewed more closely by reading the request for concept proposals. Now we'll look at some of the things to consider when developing a proposal. First, the proposed project should primarily benefit California specialty crops. This means project activities should support specialty crops rather than an individual organization or individuals. Also, costs should be allowable, reasonable, and necessary. You can find additional information in the allowable and unallowable costs and activities table included in the handouts. We'll also discuss this briefly later. Second, the project should accomplish at least one program priority identified in the RFCP. The number of priorities isn't a factor in scoring criteria, so it isn't necessary to select more than one. Consider identifying the single priority that is closest to what your organization already does. Third, the project must be able to accomplish at least one outcome measure. Like program priorities, the number of outcome measures and indicators is not a factor in scoring criteria. It's most important that you select an outcome measure that can be reasonably achieved, measured, and reported upon within the grant duration. Also note that changes cannot be made to the outcome measures as written. We want to ensure that all projects selected through this process are successful. If your proposal is selected for funding, having a unique entity identifier or UEI number and registration with SAM will ensure that an agreement can be executed promptly and the project can begin on the intended start date. If you have already previously registered with SAM, you've been automatically assigned a UEI and can find it by logging into your organization's record on SAM. If you do not have a UEI number and registration with SAM, we strongly encourage you to begin the process immediately. If you are fiscally sponsored, we recommend your fiscal sponsor begin this process now if they are not already registered. The administrative requirements of federal funds are extensive and include all of the following. Grant costs, including the activities of salaried staff and any contractors or consultants, need to be tracked separate of and in addition to an organization's regular costs. Invoices must be submitted at least quarterly and no more frequently than monthly. Reports must be submitted twice a year, including a final report at the end of the grant duration. You will need to retain all records, and they need to be easily accessible for 3 years after the federal award concludes, in this case through January 31st, 2032. Depending on the current staffing or structure of your organization, you may want to develop a budget that includes direct costs to administer the grant, either through additional staffing or through a contracted grant administrator. If you have questions about these requirements, again, please reach out for individual assistance. We would like to briefly address some unallowable costs that may cause a project to be disqualified. All SCBGP projects are subject to the federal cost principles, and all organizations eligible for the Additional Assistance Program are subject specifically to 2 CFR 200. Some unallowable costs that are frequently included in proposals include donations, including personnel, supplies, or indirect costs associated with donations. That includes distributing produce or costs associated with growing produce that will eventually be donated. Note that if educational activities are taking place, sampling of specialty crops or food prepared with specialty crops is allowed. We recommend using a 3-bite rule of thumb when deciding whether something is a sample or a donation. Costs that benefit individuals rather than the specialty crop as a whole. Participant stipends are allowed, but they must be reasonable and justified. Generally, smaller stipends that offset the cost of attending a training or other educational event, such as transportation costs, are allowed. Larger stipends may be allowed if it can be demonstrated that participants are meaningfully contributing to the success of the grant project. For example, stipends for speakers or trainers are generally allowable for a reasonable cost. Stipends that serve an incentive purpose, that is, stipends that are designed to encourage participants to take part in an educational or training series or event, are generally not allowed. Material improvements, such as building or installing irrigation or paying establishment costs, are seen as providing an individual benefit to an individual or organization and are not allowable. SCBGP funds cannot be expended in support of non-specialty crops when these costs cannot be clearly identified and tracked. This is often the case at farmers markets or similar venues which may provide specialty crops and non-specialty crops. Some costs are considered indirect costs and cannot usually be charged to the SCBGP grant. These include general office supplies like printer paper or pens, insurance, utilities, etc. The indirect cost rate is set at 8% of the total of salary and fringe benefit costs. Note that the SCBGP project does not have to include all the activities your organization takes part in. For example, if your organization currently does nutrition education and distributes produce boxes, you could use SCBGP funds to cover an educational project while continuing to produce distribution with other non-SCBGP funds. We recommend not discussing unallowable costs or activities in your proposal if possible, as USDA discourages the use of cost share. Unallowable costs that are essential to a proposed project may be covered using cost share. Again, please reach out to grants@cdfa.ca.gov with questions or for clarification. Here are a few quick tips for completing your application. Please do not convert the application into a different file format, as this may edit or remove the application's formatting. It may be helpful to draft your answers in Microsoft Word so you can proofread and use spell check. Also, make sure to double-check your budget for calculation errors or typos. And please don't wait until the last minute to work on your application. Reach out early for one-on-one support in completing your proposal. Finally, here is a list of resources within CDFA, SAM.gov, and USDA. That concludes the additional assistance presentation. We look forward to receiving your proposals. And if you have any additional questions or need additional assistance, please contact us at grants@cdfa.ca.gov or by calling 916-657-3231.